Today I want to talk about feeling out of place in the world. Not necessarily just feeling lonely, but also having this deeper sense of not truly belonging anywhere. I want to talk about my own experience with this feeling and how I grew to be more at peace with it. Hopefully you'll find at least something helpful here. I think feeling like an outsider is something that a lot of people can really relate to. I know I can. Growing up, I was kind of different, and I often didn't feel like I fit in. And I know that's a common thing for people to go through, but for quite a while, I really did struggle to make friends. And I remember being really sad about that, because I saw so many other kids who were able to form what I saw as these great friendships, but for a long time, it felt so out of reach for me. Now, to be clear, most of the other kids were nice to me and treated me well, and I still have a lot of genuine appreciation for a lot of the people I went to school with. But I didn't really know how to form deeper connections with people, especially within group settings. I had a hard time talking to people, and even though I got better at it over the years and was eventually able to make a few friends, it was still a struggle. But then, in 2017, shortly before the end of my junior year in high school, I found out that I had grade 4 brain cancer. And next thing I know, I'm spending 34 days straight in the hospital, and my life has changed forever. I had to undergo 30 days of radiation and 55 weeks of chemotherapy. Life was never the same ever since. Ever since I finished cancer treatment in 2018, I've largely been isolated from the outside world. And even though I've been in remission for many years, and my parents and relatives have been very loving and supportive of me, and I'm truly thankful for that, I've never been well enough to participate in society in the way that most people do. And although it's unfortunate that because of my health issues, there's certain things that I just can't do anymore, like going to the movie theater or playing video games or going to concerts, that in and of itself isn't too bad. At least I could do those things for most of my life, and I have great memories. But one of the downsides of that is not being able to do those things anymore also robs me of social opportunities. And it's not just having a hard time talking to people or being socially isolated due to the effects of my cancer treatment. For me, there's more to the feeling of not belonging than just those things. And we don't have to get that personal, but it hurts to feel like a defective person. And that's certainly how it can feel at times. But I want to tell you what's helped me out, and hopefully it can help you as well, because I know I'm not the only one with experience with these types of feelings. I think a big part of feeling like you don't belong is this idea that people don't truly understand what you're going through, and that the things you have to deal with are uniquely bad. And you might actually have genuinely uncommon problems, or find yourself being misunderstood by the people around you. However, something I've learned more over the years is that what I thought weren't very common experiences and feelings are actually more universal than I thought. Something that's helped me a lot is to try to zoom out, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. In a world of over 8 billion people, that means that even if only 1% of people will ever understand what I'm going through, that would still be at least 80 million people. To put things into perspective, a country of 80 million people would be larger in population than 176 countries. And that's assuming that only 1% of people can relate to you. And maybe I'll never get to know any of those people personally, but I can at least take solace in knowing that I'm not alone in whatever I'm going through. And just being able to envision that many other people are going through something similar is something that helps me out. As much of an outlier as you may think you are, there are absolutely people who are willing to hear you out and can understand you on a deep level. And maybe it won't be easy to find them, but they're out there. I promise you that they're out there. But I know that might not always be enough to make you feel better, especially if that feeling of not belonging is a deep-seated one. I know I would get the feeling that there isn't really a place in the world for me. But how could that be? There's gotta be a place for me. There's no way that in a world with this many people that there can't be a place for me somehow. And you don't need to feel like you belong to a group or a community to know that you belong in this world. And I think that's important to say, in case your idea of belonging somewhere involves having a very active social life or neatly fitting into a community or culture. A lot of the most enriching interactions I've had have come from one-on-one conversations, not in a group, but just interacting with individual people. And even just one person who truly understands you can already make a huge difference. And when groups die down and cliques dissolve, those individual friendships are ultimately what's gonna matter. And as a Christian, I believe that even if nobody else understands me, I can at least know that God does, and that's more than enough. And I believe that He wouldn't have put me on this earth if I had no business being here. As I've gotten older, I've realized that a lot of the pain I experienced when I was younger had to do with me seeing other people who seemed to have a much easier time making friends than I was. And it made me feel like, well, what am I doing wrong? What's wrong with me? But as cliche as it may sound, comparing yourself to others isn't always helpful. And I've learned over the years to accept my own shortcomings more. You can't control all of the cards that you're dealt, but you can try to make do with what you have. One of the things that we can't control, at least not by much, is the world at large. It definitely doesn't help that it feels like people are becoming more selfish and just more cold-blooded, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks that. And so it can be easy to become cynical, especially if you're constantly being bombarded with negative news stories and all sorts of awful things on social media. And I think this is one big reason why a lot of people feel alienated and like they don't belong anywhere. Because they see how awful people can be, and they feel like, if this is what the world is like, then I guess I just don't belong. But I also want to say this. One of the things that made my cancer treatment more bearable back in 2017 and 2018 is that I got to meet some truly kind people. I got to experience firsthand the kindness of a lot of people when I was going through that. Whether it was the kind people working at the hospital, or the charities, or people who I didn't even know but who were rooting for me and genuinely cared. It really showed me the compassionate side of people. There are people right now who are actively trying to do good things and are doing what they can to support their communities. People do kind and generous things all the time. It just doesn't usually get reported on the news, and so people don't hear about that. I think another thing that can hold people back is there can be a hesitation to be more sincere and vulnerable, since people don't want to be seen as cringe and suffer the social consequences of that. In fact, I didn't even want to use the word vulnerable because I didn't want you to cringe. And it's understandable to want to be mindful of things like that. Maybe you're too afraid that you'll come off as corny or sappy, and that your sincerity will be met with mockery, discomfort, or just straight up apathy. But I think it's better to take the risk of being corny or cringy than to regret not saying something important. And I know it can be challenging because, in my experience, there really are times when it feels like I could be potentially setting myself up for some sort of humiliation or embarrassment when I just want to be sincere. But ultimately, I want to be more like the kind of person that I myself would look up to, even if that means sometimes coming off as cringe. And that's not to say that now I put my 100% complete self out there, because there are things that should be kept private, but I think my own lack of openness in the past is part of why I had a harder time making friends than a lot of people. And if you really want to be seen and known for who you truly are, then you have to be willing to put yourself out there more. And it's not always easy, but it can be deeply rewarding. Another thing that's definitely helped me out in my life is the internet. Now, I know the internet can be a pretty double-edged sword, and we're generally pretty aware of the problems with it. You've probably heard a lot about predators, scammers, and just shady people in general. But for me, there have been life-changing friendships that I wouldn't have made if it wasn't for the internet. And I know some people poo-poo the idea of internet friends, but I don't know what my life would look like if it wasn't for them. And of course, if you're able to, it's good to go out into the real world and try to meet new people and make those connections. But for some people, for a variety of different reasons, the internet might be their main window to the outside world. And that's not ideal, but it is what it is. And a lot of people will say that the downside of communicating online is that you don't really get to know a person as well as you can in real life. And there can certainly be truth to that. However, I also think there are times that the internet, more specifically social media and messaging apps like Discord, can do a better job at revealing who somebody really is. Because many people might not be willing to say certain things in real life, but when they get online, that's when you see what they really think. So that can be one benefit of knowing someone online. And to go back to my earlier point about how even if only 1% of people in the world could relate to you, that would still be over 80 million people, the internet really strengthens this, because even if you have a pretty obscure problem, there might be a community online of people who also deal with that. There's so many different groups and communities for all sorts of different things. And that's both good and bad. I just want to say, be smart about it, because it can be really easy for people to get into these circles that just constantly reinforce the things that they already believe. And that can lead you down some pretty dark rabbit holes. And of course, it's always important to be mindful of whether a community will be good for you, or if it will just enable your worst vices. Something I think can also help if you don't feel like you belong in the world is to feel like you have something that you can offer the world. And this can come in many forms, most notably by directly helping others. But one thing I want to highlight specifically is making art. And that can be anything from drawing to writing to making music. In fact, it doesn't even actually have to be art. There are people on YouTube who have found connection and community by just talking in front of a camera. No fancy editing or anything like that, just normal people sharing their thoughts on things. And you don't have to be a great artist. What matters is that it's something you made, and you can be proud of. I would much rather see a mediocre but sincere piece of art than some AI slop that was just generated in 5 seconds. You don't have to be technically proficient to make something that resonates with others. And if you feel like you don't matter, well, first of all, you do, but also, making art is a great way of making an impact on others. And just like in many ways the internet has given a voice to the voiceless, I believe that art has the power to do the same, and it might help you express something that words might not be able to do justice. And by making something and putting it out there, you're basically ensuring that there's a space for it in the world. And it doesn't always go well for everybody, but who knows? You might meet people from it who will change your life. When I think about the friends I've made online, one common thread is that we wanted to make things and share them with other people. And even if your work doesn't get much or any attention at all, you probably at least had fun making something. And I understand that not everybody wants to make things, but I think there are many people out there who would feel more fulfilled if they did more creating and less consuming. Making things is just one of many ways to give you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. When I feel really low, it helps me to think about the album that I'm working on. And it's been one of the big things that's been keeping me going. Like, I would think things to myself like, what about my album? I gotta take care of my album. That album is basically my son, and I gotta make sure there's a place for my son. And that's what it can be like when you have a project that you really care about. It gives you something to work towards, and it makes it easier to deal with negative feelings because even if I have these things that are wrong with me, at least I have this project that I can call my own, even if it's still a work in progress. But with that being said, I'm not saying you should tie your self-worth or your entire identity to what you make, because you are more than what you can do. And your worth isn't tied to how productive or talented you are, nor is it tied to how well you fit in or how positive you are. I think part of why people may feel alienated is that anything that isn't happy or positive can be stigmatized. Many people seem to be uncomfortable with even the mere concept of anything negative, and would much rather move on if it means they don't have to momentarily feel awkward. This tendency to automatically default to positivity is very deeply ingrained in our social fabric, but it often comes at the cost of authenticity. And if we can't have authentic conversations with each other, then we can't meaningfully relate to each other. It's also very easy to dismiss others by just telling them to see a therapist. Now, I want to be clear. If you're going through something that might need professional help, I encourage you to seek it out. Therapists, psychologists, and other types of professionals can handle a lot of different things. You don't have to suffer alone. And I'm not saying that everyone who suggests that you seek professional help is doing it in a cynical or dismissive way. They might have your best interests in mind. But I think it's worth saying that not everybody needs a therapist. A lot of people just want someone to listen to them and care about them. Maybe someone just needs a friend or a person to talk to, but instead it's like they're basically being told that they have to pay a professional just so somebody will listen to them. Also, not everybody can even afford therapy. And although there's definitely kind people out there who are willing to hear you out, I think a lot of people just aren't willing to hear it, unfortunately. So I think people can feel this pressure to try to be positive even when they're really suffering. And there are times when that can be useful, but there's also times when you just need to let yourself feel the pain. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to act like some sort of expert who's got it all figured out. Because even though I feel more of a sense of belonging these days, it can still hurt a lot to be different in certain ways that make me feel alienated from others, and it hurts when you feel like you can't process certain things as well as someone more normal. So it's not like I've completely overcome these things, it's more like these are things that have helped me, and hopefully they can be helpful to you too. So if you feel like you don't belong anywhere, and you just haven't found people who get you, or something in your life that keeps you going, just know that there are very many people in your position, and you're far from alone. And even in times of deep suffering, there's a lot of beauty to be found in the world. And even if you feel alone or out of place right now, it's far better than being around people who don't respect you or aren't good for you. There are people who continue to hang out with people who don't even seem to like them, and it kills them inside. Like, at that point, it's better to just be alone. And as much as we're human beings who deeply crave connection, there is a value to solitude. And unfortunately, that's something that's been eroding more and more over time. We live in a noisy world. And group dynamics also have their own shortcomings. So there can certainly be a silver lining to being more on your own. And you can still find meaning and purpose in your life even if you don't feel like you belong. There are people who will say things like, "Oh, we're just a bunch of specks of dust on a big floating rock and nothing means anything." But that's a very short-sighted way to see the world. We're all human beings with inherent worth, and we can at least have an impact on the people around us. You may not feel like you belong, but maybe belonging is just around the corner. Just know that you have as much of a right to be here as anybody else. And remember, everyone is unique, and your life matters more than you can truly know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Stay safe.